Hello and welcome from Clark's Legal. Thank you for your time today. I am Afifa Shabir, a business immigration solicitor.
I am Nikita Sinecha, an employment and immigration solicitor.
Today we are going to be discussing how UK businesses can recruit workers from outside non-EEA countries. We think it's important for HR and global mobility professionals to understand how UK companies can hire foreign workers. This is not just to fill hard to recruit vacancies, but also to develop a talent pipeline. In this webinar, we will discuss the sponsor license process, the responsibilities which come with obtaining a sponsor license, including the sponsor duties you have to fulfill as a sponsor, the current work visa routes. We will cover the Tier 2 general, the Tier 2 intra-company transfer and Tier 5 temporary workers and the associated costs. We will end the webinar by going through some commonly asked questions by clients.
Given the current political climate in the UK, I suppose we should mention European workers. There will be a lot of changes in the next 12 months in the immigration rules and post-Brexit. Theresa May has confirmed that European workers will require visas after we leave the EU, and it is likely that they will be subject to the same rules that currently apply to non-EEA nationals. For businesses, this could mean you would need to sponsor European workers under the Tier 2 route. We won't be focusing on the status of European workers in this webinar, but just quickly we wanted to clarify that for now, EEA nationals can continue to live and work in the UK under free movement rules, and those who are abroad can still relocate here.
So let's get started. Why would a UK business need to look overseas for workers? Well, there are a number of reasons. The most common reason is to fill a vacancy which can't be filled by the British or settled workforce. Some sectors, such as the tech sector, rely on international talent. We often speak to HR who have advertised the same vacancy for 6 months and only a few candidates will apply who don't even have the necessary skill set required for the role. They then find the perfect candidate, but he or she is not from the UK. Employers are also recognizing the value of bringing in people from abroad because they have skills, techniques, and experience that they can teach the domestic workforce. There might also be an opportunity to hire an international graduate who has just completed their studies in one of our highly ranked universities. You wouldn't be able to hire the graduate without permission from the Home Office, and they would need the correct visa to work for you. We are also seeing that more and more overseas businesses are choosing to expand their operations to the UK. This is more common now from businesses in the Commonwealth countries. We are seeing such businesses set up a branch or a subsidiary in the UK and then transfer their skilled staff over. The UK is arguably a good place to base your European operations. So whatever your reasons, one thing is for certain, you can't hire foreign workers without permission from the Home Office.
So how do you go about recruiting foreign workers and how simple is it? Before you can sponsor workers, you will need to obtain a sponsor licence from the Home Office, which is basically permission to recruit foreign workers. Applications are pretty straightforward and involve demonstrating that your business is operating and trading lawfully in the UK and you have genuine vacancies which can't be filled by the settled workforce. By this we mean British workers, non-EEA nationals, those who might have settled status and those who hold an ancestry visa. The Home Office maintains a public register which lists all registered sponsors. There are currently over 29,000 sponsors and the list is growing. Once you have a sponsor licence, you will be able to assign permission to workers which they can use to obtain a visa. This specific permission is by way of something called a certificate of sponsorship. This is a document online which you fill in and include the personal information of the person you wish to sponsor, the job activities they will undertake, and the salary you will pay them. Remember, you can only sponsor highly skilled workers and you must pay them an appropriate rate. The skill level and salary threshold is set by the government.
The Home Office expects you to recruit from the domestic workforce first. In most cases, you will have to advertise the vacancies before you can offer them to a migrant. This would involve advertising the position in 2 separate places, usually the government's Job Match Service and professional recruitment organisations. You would be expected to interview potential candidates and consider them for the role. This process is called satisfying the resident labour market test. There are some exceptional circumstances where you won't need to satisfy this test. This may be, for example, if the job is on the government's shortage of occupation list or where you intend to recruit a graduate who is currently in the UK with a student visa. In these circumstances, sponsorship is straightforward.
Obtaining a sponsor licence is a big responsibility. Over the years, the government has delegated more and more responsibility to employers who wish to sponsor foreign workers. When you become a sponsor licence holder, the Home Office puts a lot of trust in you and wants to be kept updated should, for example, a sponsored worker unexpectedly fail to attend work. Some of the duties you'll be signing up for are record-keeping duties, reporting duties, sponsoring workers is a genuine vacancy, and cooperating with the Home Office. So let's look at these duties.
The first, record-keeping duties. You will need to retain evidence of the worker's visa permission and also any documents which show how they are qualified to do the job in question. This may be CVs, references, and academic certificates. You will also need to keep a record of the worker's contact details, residential address, absences from the UK due to business trips, and general absences such as sickness. If you are required to carry out the resident labour market test, then you will need to keep evidence of the adverts. These are normally screenshots of the advert if posted online. The screenshots must show, for example, when the advert was posted, when it closed, the job description, and salary. UKVI can ask for these documents at any time, so you must make sure they are readily available.
The Home Office has delegated the responsibility of policing migrants to employers. This means sponsors have a huge responsibility to report certain activities to the Home Office promptly. This is a second duty and arguably the most important one. For example, if a worker doesn't turn up on the first day of work, or if they are absent from work for 10 consecutive days with no explanation, you would also be expected to report any changes to your organisation. For example, if you're involved in a merger. If you fail to report the activities specified by the guidance, you could lose your sponsor licence.
The third duty we should discuss is the genuine vacancy. You can only sponsor workers in roles which are highly skilled. You need to ensure that the job description and advert you post is an accurate portrayal of the vacancy. The worker can only carry out the activities specified in the certificate of sponsorship. They can only do the tasks you told the Home Office they would do. They can't then do lower skilled jobs. You must also pay the worker the appropriate rate for the job, in which we will discuss later. UK Visas and Immigration can request job descriptions or visit your premises and speak to your workers to check they are doing the job they have been granted the visa to do. If you are thinking about applying for a sponsor license, you will need to think about who in your staff will be responsible for helping you comply with your sponsor duties. They will also need to be available to meet with immigration officers on a visit. When you apply for the license, you will need to appoint an authorizing officer. This ideally should be someone in a senior position who is in charge of recruitment. When you get the license, you will be given access to a sponsor management system. This is an online system which allows you to assign certificates of sponsorship and report, as we discussed before. You should appoint SMS users who can carry out day-to-day activities on the system.
So let's move on to the different types of work routes. When you apply for a licence, you will need to apply for permission to sponsor either Tier 2 General or Tier 2 Intra-Company Transfer workers, or even both depending on your business needs. You would ask for a Tier 2 General licence if you want to sponsor workers in highly skilled roles which can be filled by the domestic workforce. These workers then apply for a visa which allows them to come to the UK and apply for settlement after 5 years of being in the UK under the visa. You would ask for a Tier 2 Intra-Company Transfer licence if you're an international business and you need to transfer your highly skilled senior workers to the UK, or if you have an international graduate programme and you want to send the graduate to the UK for training in your business. Think very carefully about the type of worker you will need and your duties in respect of each tier.
Let's move on and discuss the skill level of the worker you hire and the appropriate salary you must pay. The government have published codes of practice which list all the highly skilled roles you can sponsor. You can only sponsor someone whose job will be RQF level 6 or above. You should compare the job description to the ones in the codes and identify the most appropriate code. For jobs on the shortage of occupation list, there are some exemptions. As to salary thresholds, the government have set guidelines on how much you should pay a sponsored worker. For a Tier 2 general worker who is considered experienced, you would need to pay a minimum salary of either £30,000, or if the salary is higher in the code of practice, you would pay that salary. If the worker is considered a new entrant, for example someone who is switching from a student visa after graduating in the UK, the salary would be £20,800. The salary for intra-company transfers depends on whether they are a long-term staff worker or a graduate trainee. For a long-term worker, the minimum salary would be £41,500, and for a graduate trainee, this is £23,000. You will need to be familiar with skill levels and salary thresholds because if you state the incorrect information on the certificate of sponsorship, the worker will not be granted their visa and this would lead to delays.
The Tier 5 temporary worker category is for workers required to be in the UK for a short time. In particular, you can use this category to hire graduates who want to come to the UK for a short time for work experience or to do training or even research. This category is also used to sponsor creative and sports people, charity workers and religious workers. There's no way of getting away from the costs associated with sponsoring workers. Firstly, you will need to pay for the sponsor licence. For small businesses, this is £536, and for medium and large businesses, this is £1,476. You will then also need to pay for each certificate of sponsorship, which is £199. In the majority of cases, you will also need to pay an immigration skills levy. This is a charge per each year of the certificate of sponsorship for each worker. For a small business, this is £364 per year, and for larger sponsors, this is £1,000. So, for example, if you want to hire a worker for 5 years and your business is considered large, you would pay £5,000 for the course. These costs are separate to the fees the worker would have to pay for their visa and immigration health surcharge.
Applying for a sponsor license can be straightforward for most applicants. You'd make an application online and send supporting documents to the Home Office confirming your eligibility. It's important you send the requisite documents in the correct format to avoid delays and rejection. Remember, a sponsor license is a big responsibility, so before you apply, you should be confident that your HR professionals are aware of the immigration rules and would be able to fulfill your sponsor duties.
So, before we end the webinar today, we just want to go through some commonly asked questions. Employers like to think long term, so one of the questions we are asked is how long do they need to sponsor a worker for? Well, under the Tier 2 general route, you can only sponsor a worker for a maximum of 6 years. Usually, after 5 years, the worker becomes eligible for settlement, and once they obtain that, you won't need to sponsor them anymore. The intra-company transfer route doesn't lead to settlement, but high earners could stay in the UK for up to 9 years on this visa.
Another question we get is whether an international graduate can be sponsored after they have graduated. When a student is switching to a work visa, you won't need to carry out the resident labour market test and you won't need to pay the immigration skills charge. Sponsorship for these individuals is straightforward.
We would finish with one more question. Employers often want to know how the Home Office monitor compliance. Once you're a sponsor, UKVI reserve the right to visit your premises and sites linked to your licence. They will be visiting to check that you are assigning COS correctly, sponsored workers are carrying out duties as per their COS, and that you are retaining documentation which shows that you are satisfying the resident labour market test. If UKVI are not satisfied with your procedures, they can suspend or revoke your licence and you will lose the ability to sponsor workers.
Thank you for listening in today. We hope this webinar has given you a good overview of the sponsor license process. Whilst it can be costly to sponsor foreign workers, it can also be very beneficial. Businesses need to be able to access the right skills, and as most know, sometimes those skills come from abroad.